Welcome to the 83rd episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. We are back after a fairly long layoff. My apologies for that, but I was quite busy. But I think that UFC 280 is a great opportunity to get back in the regular posting schedule. So here we are with a preview for the event. We're going to go through, we're going to talk about every single fight. Obviously, the fights at the top of the card: Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira, TJ Dillashaw, Aljamain Sterling. Pretty much every fight on the main card and some of the fights on the prelims we're going to talk about pretty extensively. I have a lot more opinions on those, obviously, because those fights are far more important. So we're going to focus a lot on those, but we are going to talk about the prelim fights as well. We're going to start right at the top, and I am going to enter my predictions into Tapology as we go. So you will get to hear my full thought process and how I'm breaking down this fight. If you are interested, my Tapology picks are public, I believe. Head Kick KO podcast. You can go and look at all of my picks on there. If you're curious, we're shooting at 57.7% since 2020. Goal is to get that to 60%. But in 2022, I'm sitting at 62.1%. So not bad. In case you were curious, those are the stats there so far this year. Now, top of this card, Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. This is probably my favorite fight of this year. I think this fight is very interesting for a laundry list of reasons, but I think there's one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that I think makes this fight so very, very important. The winner of this fight, I have a very hard time seeing any other lightweight beat them. Charles Oliveira has already beaten Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. If Charles Oliveira is able to go out there and beat Islam Makhachev, I don't know who else would be able to beat him. You know, I think Dariush is good. I think Gamerat's good. I think Rafael Fiziev is good. I think some of these up-and-coming lightweights are very good, but I just don't think that at this moment they would be able to beat Charles Oliveira. And I think if you look at Islam Makhachev, I don't think that, he would probably have to, first off, he would probably have to go through the other guys here in this division that Charles has already beat, like Gaethje, like Poirier, like Chandler, in whichever order we see that happen. But I don't see any of those guys beating Makhachev. And if you want to go deeper down, and the same guys I just listed for Charlie Olives here, I don't think that Beneil Dariush would be able to beat Makhachev. I don't think that Gamerat would be able to. I don't think that, all these very, very talented lightweights, all great fighters, but I think these two guys are just the clear 1 and 2 in this division. And I think the winner will be able to rule this lightweight division for a very, very long time. And the winner of this fight will also have an opportunity, it sounds like, to fight Alexander Volkanovski, who wants to move up to 155 and compete for that lightweight belt. And once again, that's just another great opportunity. And I don't know who I would pick in those fights. I think Volkanovski is the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. But at what point does the physical strength of Makhachev be too much? At what point does the reach of Charles Oliveira be too much? I think there are some elements in each of those fights that would, make it a difficult fight for Volkanovski. But I mean, I'm not saying Volkanovski doesn't have a chance, but I think that those would both be too close fights. So basically what I'm saying here is this fight is, in my opinion, one of the most important fights of all time, because I think it sets the winner up to make a run at becoming the best lightweight of all time. As dominant as Habib was, he doesn't have the, laundry list resume. He doesn't have a massive resume. He has 4 really solid wins. He has those wins in very impressive fashion, but he's not someone, in my opinion, who has set an unbeatable, pace. Or I think someone else can catch him And I think the winner of Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev will have a massive opportunity to do that. So that is why I think this fight is so important. And before you even break into like stylistical differences and the crazy stretches that these guys have been on, I think that is the first thing about this fight that I think of is how this sets the table for the rest of these guys' careers. And I think there's a chance that these guys could fight 3 times. And the winner of the first fight in a trilogy, I'd much rather be in that position than rather having to win 2 and 3. So I think there's a lot of things at play here, but ultimately, what makes me so intrigued in this fight, like I said, is the fact that the winner is possibly going to be will have the opportunity to be a top 10 fighter of all time simply because of the way that this division is currently set up and how good these guys are. Now, in terms of actual stylistic things, I've watched a lot of tape here on Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, and I feel like Charles Oliveira is a fighter that I have a fairly good read of in how he fights and how he does things. And he does okay. So stripping away the matchup with Makhachev for a second, I love the way that Charles Oliveira moves forward, right? When he moves forward, it sets up the rest of his game beautifully. He moves forward, he throws teeps, he hits you in the body with those teeps, he gets you reacting with those teeps, he gets you backed up against the fence, and from there he can work into his clinch positions, and his clinch positions are amazing. The way that Charles Oliveira fights out of the clinch, I think it's better than any fighter in I don't even know who I would compare it to, because it's different than like guys who just have a dominant Muay Thai clinch. The element of grappling that is in Charles Oliveira's clinch work is what separates it, in my opinion. So you start it with Charles Oliveira gets his takedowns from the clinch. So when he clinches up with his opponent has to be mindful that they can get taken down, and then they're dealing with the jiu-jitsu of Charles Oliveira. But instead of going for these takedowns, he will then look to throw knees to the body. He'll throw some knees to the head. He throws elbows. And he mixes in all these tools that, on one hand, you're worried about the takedown. You're worried about getting taken down. But then he throws a bunch of massive, powerful tools, very damaging tools, and he's able to hit you and be successful in landing a variety of different attacks. So now you're sitting here going, all right, do I work on defending the takedown? Do I work on making sure he doesn't knee me to the body? Like, how do you defend that from a defensive position? And we see a lot of guys go, okay, I just don't want to be in the clinch. I will just leave this position. I will exit. I will do whatever I can to back out of that clinch position. The issue with that is, as guys are moving away, Charles Oliveira is very good at striking as guys exit that clinch. That's how he got Justin Gaethje. That's how he got that knockdown. Gaethje was moving away from the clinch positions, and his mind was thinking, I got to get out of the clinch. And while his mind's thinking that, here comes a straight right that puts him down. So for Charles Oliveira, the way he uses his Muay Thai as kind of a bridge to his Muay Thai clinch, he uses that as a bridge between his grappling and his striking. And because his grappling is so good, that then elevates his striking. And with the high pace that he has, he fights at such a high, incredible pace, just pressuring you. I've never seen a fighter so tired as Dustin Poirier was going into the third round of that fight. I worded that very wrongly. I've never seen Dustin Poirier so tired going into the third round of a fight, is what I meant to say there. Big difference. But for someone like Dustin Poirier to be that tired and that, dejected going into the third round, I think that speaks volume to what his pace and pressure can do. And those knees to the body just, make that even worse, because he's fighting at such a high pace where it's action, nonstop action, grappling, striking. You have to do everything, and it can wear on you very badly. And then you mix in these teeps and these knees to the body, where now not only are you fighting at this high pace, but you're getting smoked with some of his best tools to the body. and that only takes from your gas tank even further. So I think Charles Oliveira is a very tough guy to beat, is what I'm telling you. The flaws in Oliveira's game, I think that, there's a lot of flaws in his striking defense, and that is natural for someone who is as good of a grappler as he is. I think that is a theme, and I think that I talk about a lot on this podcast is guys who are great grapplers. You're able to, and this isn't like my revelation. I'm not saying this as I'm the first person to ever stumble upon this, thought, but there are plenty of ways that you can attack Charles Oliveira offensively that can hurt him. We've seen Charles Oliveira get a little bit over aggressive, and if you can stay composed in those moments of over aggression and work to counter, and if you can notice and pick up on tendencies of aggression, and you can capitalize in those moments, if you can get into a 5 or 6 punch exchange between the two of you and you're a better boxer, I think that you can find a lot of success. We saw Poirier land some nice counters, and we saw him come out on top of extended exchanges. Also, Michael Chandler did a very good job of moving forward and throwing big looping shots, and when Charles is moving backwards, you can hit him a little bit easy. It's a little bit easier to hit him when he's moving backwards in comparison to when he's standing still. For a variety of reasons, I think he, won't move his head as much as he otherwise would, and there are a couple of other things. But Charles Oliveira, those are his main flaws. Now, Islam Makhachev is a tough fighter to analyze, and I think that's because of the competition that he's faced, right? And not as much of I'm not mad about it, but I think that's something that you have to recognize while you're evaluating his game. I do think that Islam Makhachev has tremendous wrestling. I'm not ever going to say otherwise. He's probably the best, not probably, he is the best wrestler in this division. And he is so good at taking you down, controlling position, and just not giving you any space to breathe, not giving you any opportunities to escape. And he eventually works his way to a submission or ground and pound. Now, at the same time, when you look at, you have to go a while back in Makhachev's resume to really gain a better understanding of his grappling and what he can do. Because if you just look at his most recent fights, like Bobby Green and Dan Hooker are fairly easy stylistic matchups because neither of those guys are ever going to be able to grapple with Islam Makhachev. Once again, though, that's not Makhachev's fault because he was supposed to fight Beneil Dariush and Rafael Dos Anjos. Neither of those guys neither of those guys made it to fight day. They both had to cancel the bout. So it's not his fault, but that's just the reality of the situation. But he did do well in fights against Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, and Arman Tsarukyan, who are all very, very, very strong grapplers. So he's proven that he can go out there and out-grapple other very, very good grapplers. My question is, even when you're looking at those guys, Moises, Dober, and Tsarukyan, they don't have the striking of Oliveira. And I don't think we've seen... I think there's this thing where you see someone who is fighting at such a high level that you don't see the weaknesses because no one has exposed them. We've seen Charles Oliveira's weaknesses over his last 3 fights, and at least the ones that I just mentioned, but because he has fought such high-level competition that they are able to draw out those weaknesses. I think another good example is Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev looked absolutely unbeatable going into his fight with Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns ended up winning at least one round of that fight, and you can make an argument that he won 2. I'm not going to argue how anyone scored that fight. That's not what I'm here to do. But if you watch that fight, you can then pinpoint some flaws of Khamzat Chimaev's game because that is the first time that he fought an elite-level opponent. And I think in this fight between Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, I think that Charles Oliveira will be able to at least expose some flaws and some negatives in his game. And I don't think that he will be as dominant
as, people expect him to be. I think he can do some very good things in this fight, right? I think he is a championship caliber fighter. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that Charles Oliveira will be able to find areas that we can't sit here and pinpoint right now, right? I can't really sit here and pinpoint, oh, Islam Makhachev has a flaw in X area, so because of that, Charles Oliveira can succeed in this way. But I think Charles will be able to exploit some of those issues that we haven't seen yet and then be successful in those areas. And even if Charles doesn't win this fight, which, not to spoil my prediction, but, regardless of who wins this fight, I think that future fighters will have a better game plan to beat Islam Makhachev. But once again, they won't have the BJJ of Charles Oliveira, so it may not even be of any use. So, and then a couple other things before I roll into my prediction here. This has been quite a long breakdown so far, but I think it's important because this is a great fight. The clinch work of Charles Oliveira, we talked about at length about what makes him so good in that regard. I'm interested to see how Islam Makhachev approaches that. I think it would be a good idea for Islam Makhachev in those clinch scenarios to pressure into Charles Oliveira, try to get him up against the fence, try and hold him up against the fence, try and go for takedowns in those clinch scenarios. I think that would be very, very beneficial because if he can do that, he can look to take away one of the biggest aspects of Charles Oliveira's game. And I think that would help him a lot and help him be successful if he can do those things in the clinch and kind of negate that strength of Charles Oliveira. And once he gets the fight to the ground, I'm interested to see what those scrambles look like. I'm interested to see if Charles Oliveira lays on his back and tries to attempt submissions, throwing up triangles, things like that. I'm interested to see if Charles Oliveira goes for sweeps. I'm interested to see if Islam Makhachev can get inside control and just hold Charles Oliveira down, and how does Charles Oliveira react? Does Charles Oliveira lay on his back, or does Charles Oliveira scramble to get up? If he does scramble to get up, can he get up? I think those are the biggest questions of this fight, in my opinion. Because if Charles Oliveira is able to scramble and get back up, I think that, he would easily win this fight. I think that if Makhachev wins, he would really need to suffocate Charles Oliveira either on the ground or up against the fence. Until that initial burst of Oliveira is gone. I think Oliveira does have really good cardio. But I think in the fourth and fifth round, Islam would be able to pull ahead a slight bit. I'm not saying that Charles Oliveira will wilt and give up. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying he could be able to pull ahead a little bit and be a little bit more dominant in those fourth and fifth rounds. If he's able to hold Oliveira up against the cage and really, suffocate him like he has some other guys. And I'm not saying that Oliveira can't be successful in the fourth and fifth rounds. Don't think that's what I'm saying, because he has been successful later in fights when things didn't go his way initially. I think he has at least 2 third-round submissions on his resume. Those obviously aren't fourth rounds, but getting something done in the third round is, a better indication that he can get some work done in the fourth round than if he hadn't have gone to the third round, if you get what I'm saying. Dustin Poirier, third round. Kevin Lee, third round, both submissions. So he does have the ability to get things done into the third round, and he hasn't shown the ability to get things done in round 4 or round 5, but he also hasn't been there in a decent period of time. Decision win against Tony Ferguson. That would have went to the fourth round. He was just unable to get a finish. Everything else finishes round 1 or 2. Lost to Pettis via guillotine in round 3. Beat Nick Lentz guillotine in round 3. Jeremy Stevens unanimous decision. 3-round fight. Third round against Andy Ogle. Right? Not a lot of fourth or fifth rounds on this resume. So I'm not sure that, I don't know. I honestly don't know what this fight looks like in the 4th or 5th rounds, but I do think it would lean a little bit in Makhachev's favor if he can get it that deep. I think I've seen some people say that if it goes past the 3rd round or if it goes past the 2nd round, kind of depending on who you listen to, that Makhachev's going to get a win. I don't necessarily think that's true, but I do understand the point. I just don't take as aggressive of a stance on that. Now I officially got into the rambling stage, so now I'm going to make my prediction since I've realized that I've been rambling for way too long. Basically, what this comes down to for me is the grappling versus the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu versus the wrestling. I think those two things can negate a little bit. And when this fight is standing, whether it is for 10 seconds or whether it's for 25 minutes, I think Oliveira will be the far better striker. I think he has far better tools. That is something that you could not say in Oliveira's last 3 bouts. You could also counter my point by saying, those 3 guys weren't near the level of grappler as Oliveira. And I wouldn't argue with you. Or excuse me. Yeah, that's what I meant. If you can't tell, my thoughts are all over the place on this fight. That's what happens when you get an incredible fight on our hands. But I just think that I can't pick against Charles Oliveira. And I picked against Oliveira. I can tell you the last 2 times I picked against Oliveira, actually. Give me a second. I picked against Oliveira against Tony Ferguson. Thinking that Tony Ferguson could pull ahead in the late rounds, in that 3rd round, and get a finish. I picked Michael Chandler to beat him by decision. And after that fight, I said, I'm not picking against Charles Oliveira. I don't care who he's fighting. And I picked him to beat Poirier, and I picked him to beat Gaethje. And I think there is, even beyond the X's and O's, I think there's an it factor with Charles Oliveira where he just finds a way to get it done. I thought, watching that fight, I thought Chandler was going to take him out in the 1st round. Watching the Poirier fight, I thought Poirier was going to take him out in the 1st round. Just not even prediction-wise, but watching the fight. While my eyes are on the TV screen, I sit here thinking, going, oh man, he's getting hit hard. I think so-and-so's going to put him out. I thought Gaethje was going to have a chance to finish him. Obviously, those scenarios weren't as scary as the previous 2, but I still thought Gaethje, had a really good shot at finding a finish. But somehow, someway, Charles Oliveira gets it done. And I think that's what we're going to see here. I think somehow, someway, Charles Oliveira gets it done. Charles Oliveira could lose this fight for 10 minutes. He could be on the bottom for 10 minutes, and he could pop up and land a massive right hand and catch Islam Makhachev in a scramble and submit him. Maybe he puts him out cold, who knows. But I think at some moment in this fight, Charles Oliveira is going to do something crazy, and I think he wins this fight. I will take Charles Oliveira by knockout in the 2nd round. Great fight, though. Great fight. I think this will probably be, this, like I said earlier, this is the fight that I'm most excited for all year because I could talk myself into picking either fighter. That's what makes it so great. Now, Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw in our co-main event. I've seen a lot of love for TJ Dillashaw out there, and I don't like to say I'm overly confident in a fighter, especially a fight this close, right? I'll say I'm very confident in a fighter if it's, Khamzat Chimaev versus Nate Diaz or, some fights like that. But in a fight that I think this betting line is, we've got plus 145 for Dillashaw, minus 170 for Aljamain Sterling, but I really like Aljamain Sterling in this fight. I look at what he did in that second fight with Petr Yan, and he was able to land enough takedowns, and every time he got a takedown in that second fight, he was able to get to a dominant position. And I think that's what he does in this fight. I think that he gets to dominant positions. I think he might go in the first round. Aljamain Sterling might go 1 for 15 on takedowns, but I think the one takedown that he does get, I think he'll be able to take the back of TJ Dillashaw, and I think he rides out that round at a minimum with a 10-9 victory because he had so much time on the back. And I know people are really high on TJ Dillashaw's takedown defense. And I agree. I think TJ has a really good takedown defense, but so does Petr Yan. And Aljamain Sterling was able to find a lot of success in that second fight with Petr Yan because he was able to take him down. And I'm not saying that these two fighters are identical, but at this stages of their career, I think that TJ Dillashaw is a slightly worse version of Petr Yan in some regards. I think there are a lot of differences. TJ Dillashaw moves differently. He's got different footwork. He can move laterally much better than Petr Yan, in my opinion. He throws different combinations. He throws very well in combinations. I think Petr Yan's a little bit better defensively against striking, and I think he is better at moving forward than TJ Dillashaw. So there are some slight differences in the way that they strike. But ultimately, these two guys are two amazing strikers that have really good striking defense, and they will keep this fight on the feet, and they will beat you, and if you try to take them down, they will stuff the takedown and then continue to work. Even Petr Yan has worked in some offensive wrestling of his own in some fights. So, but I don't think that TJ Dillashaw is a better grappler than Petr Yan. So I think based off the success that we saw Aljamain Sterling have, even if you think he lost that fight, based off the success that we saw Aljamain Sterling have in moments of that fight, I think he can do those things and more against TJ Dillashaw. For example, I don't think TJ Dillashaw has as much power as Petr Yan. I think you can make a very easy argument that Petr Yan has more power than anyone in that 135-pound division. So with that in mind, there's less threat for Aljamain as he closes the distance and looks for takedowns. I think that it's easier to land those takedowns if the other guy isn't as powerful. Like I said, he moves laterally, so landing those takedowns will be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I still think that Aljamain Sterling will be able to land takedowns in this fight. And I think if he gets this fight to the ground, he will do a lot of damage. And I'm sure you know who I'm picking. But one last thing before I make it official, TJ Dillashaw did not look great in that Corey Sandhagen fight. And when I say that, I don't mean he looked bad. I think he did some really good things. But TJ Dillashaw, the best things he did in that fight were mixing in grappling with his good striking, right? TJ Dillashaw, very good striking. I think the striking exchanges, I haven't watched that fight in ages, but the striking exchanges were very even. And TJ Dillashaw pulled ahead because he was able to mix in some clinch control and was able to do some good things in the grappling department. And that's what pulled him ahead. I don't think that he was a better striker than Corey Sandhagen in that bout. And I think he looked a little bit slower than he had in the past. And he tore his ACL, so he had to take a bunch of time off to repair that ACL. Not an easy thing to repair. You can't really do much. So I think that we're seeing TJ Dillashaw kind of on a slide, right? I don't think he's improving at this stage in his career. Meanwhile, for Aljamain Sterling also had surgery, and he also had a lot of injuries. And he took the time off to get those injuries repaired after he won the belt in March of 2021 against Petr Yan by the illegal knee. And then he got all those injuries fixed, and then we see him come back and beat Petr Yan in a split decision. So I think that since Aljamain has had his injuries, he has looked better, and he has since recovered, and he has since been more active than TJ.
So I think the younger guy in better shape, and I think Aljamain will be able to get those takedowns. And I think if he gets those takedowns, I think he takes the back. And if he takes the back, I think he eventually lands a rear naked choke submission. So I will take Aljamain Sterling by submission in the second round. That is my pick for that fight. Now, Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley, another really interesting fight. And we've already talked a lot about some of Petr Yan's skills, but Petr Yan is going to be the more well-rounded mixed martial artist here. But I don't think that's going to matter. I think this fight is going to take place, almost solely on the feet. I think we see a pure striking battle between these two. Now, I don't think this fight is going to be as big of a wash as a lot of people say. A lot of people think that Petr Yan is just going to go out there and run through Sean O'Malley. And I understand where they're coming from, and I agree with them in certain aspects. But in my opinion, I think we've seen Petr Yan start slow. A great example of that is the first round against Corey Sandhagen, a very long and rangy striker. Sandhagen won the first round of that fight, and I believe he won the fifth round on some scorecards. But he won the first round. You could be able to give him the fifth round. At best, I wouldn't even want to make that argument that he won the fifth round, but he won the first round for sure. In the first fight between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling won the second round, and Aljamain Sterling was going to win the first round until Petr Yan landed a big drop in that first round. He landed a knockdown, which won him the first round in their first fight. If he doesn't get that, if he doesn't come out on top of that one exchange, I think Aljamain Sterling wins that round. I also believe that Aljamain won the first round of their second fight, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I can pull it up, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Sorry. But the point that I'm making here is I think that we could see a slow start for Petr Yan. In the second fight, Aljamain Sterling won the first round on 2 scorecards and lost it on 1. In comparison to even in the rest of that fight, Sterling took 2 and 3, and Yan took 4 and 5. So the first round was the swing round. 2 judges gave it to Sterling. Now, I think the way that translates to this fight is I think we see another slow start from Petr Yan. I think Sean O'Malley wins the first round by staying outside, moving laterally, and just touching him. Some jabs, some straights. I don't think he does anything too crazy, but I think he wins a close first round. And the question is, in this second round, I think something is going to click with Petr Yan. I think there's going to be a moment where he gets the timing, he gets the range, and he starts landing. And my question is, at what point does that happen in the second round? Because if it happens with 30 seconds left, he loses that round. And then you have Sean O'Malley winning the first and second round. If it happens 30 seconds in, then Petr Yan would win that second round. And then you have it 1-1 going into round 3. And Yan has all the momentum in round 3. Personally, I think it happens shortly into that second round. I don't think it's going to take him much longer than 5 minutes to figure out that range, figure out some reads, figure out the timing. I think he gets those things down in very early in that second round, and I think Petr Yan wins the second round, and I think he continues that success into the third, and I think he takes a 29-28 decision victory. But if he struggles with that range a little bit more than I'm anticipating, if he struggles with the timing a little bit more than I'm anticipating, we could see Sean O'Malley kind of get a backdoor victory here where he wins 2 very, very close for rounds in rounds 1 and 2, and then in that third round, Yan takes the third round. So I think this fight could be close, and I think that there's a real possibility that Sean O'Malley wins this fight by decision by the method that I just laid out. Sorry. And If this were a 5-round fight, I would be 100 times more confident in Petr Yan. I don't think that Sean O'Malley can beat Petr Yan in a 5-round fight, but I think a 3-round fight it becomes much more likely. But I'm still going to pick Petr Yan by decision. Now, this Mateusz Gamerat and Beneil Dariush fight is another fight that is quite close and quite hard to call. I really, really like Mateusz Gamerat. I think he's a great fighter. I do think he lost to Arman Tsarukyan. However, he was given that fight on the judges' scorecards. And I think even though I believe he lost that fight, I think if you look at the skills he displayed, I still think he's an elite fighter in this division. I think we saw two in that Tsarukyan and Gamerat fight. I think we saw two guys who are both top 5 fighters in the division. I'll say top 6. If you give me, because Oliveira and Makhachev will be, one of them would be the champ, one of them is ranked number 1, and then you give me Gaethje, Poirier, and Chandler. I think those guys, next 3, and then I think you can make a very strong argument that Gamerat and Tsarukyan are the next 2. I think you could throw Fiziev in there, so maybe they're, but I think that's kind of the way I look at the lightweight division right now. But now, argue those specific spots all you want. I think you could make the case that Gamerat's better than, Gaethje, for example. I think you could make the case that he could beat Michael Chandler, for example. So they may even be higher than that. Regardless, I really like Gamerat and I really like Tsarukyan. And I think the thing that people act like this is. I think people are getting this misconstrued as Beneil Dariush being some top, long-term lightweight and someone who has been a veteran of this division. But if you were compare these two's resumes, Gamerat is so, their best wins. Beneil Dariush's best win is a win over Tony Ferguson in 2021. I think Tony Ferguson was done at that point in his career. I don't necessarily believe that to be a great win. I think Tony Ferguson was, I don't think that's prime Tony Ferguson on that resume. Comparing that to Gamerat's top win, Arman Tsarukyan in 2022, I got to give it the better win on these two's resumes to Gamerat. If you look at their next best win for each of them, if you want to give it both to Diego Ferreira, Beneil Dariush won a split decision. Gamerat beat him in the second round. From there, they both beat Scott Holtzman. Dariush did it with a spinning back fist in round 1, and Gamerat did it with ground and pound in round 2. Gamerat also has a win over Jeremy Stevens. So, in Dariush, a win over Drakkar Klose, Drew Dober, Thiago Moises. And those all came 3 to 4 years ago. Now, Gamerat also has a lot of good, strong KSW experience. He was fighting in 5-round fights over there as the featherweight champion. So, I think at this point, Gamerat probably has the deeper resume, the more impressive resume for more 5-round fights. So people are liking Dariush, I think, because he's the veteran, but I don't necessarily think that's true. Like I said, I think Gamerat has better wins, and I think he's more experienced, and he's more experienced in close 5-round fights. And I think those are all things that can really help him in this fight. Now, from a skill perspective, these two are both really great grapplers. Gamerat, I think, has a little bit of a better edge. Actually, one quick thing before we move on from resumes. Even if you think Tsarukyan beat Gamerat, like I do, I think Gamerat beat Guram Kutateladze. So I think he's got one win on his resume that you could argue is a loss, and I think he's got one loss on his resume that you can argue as a win. So we'll say those cancel out. Now we're moving on from resumes and breaking into skills. From a skills perspective, both great grapplers. Dariush, a little bit better in the BJJ department. Gamerat, a little bit better in the wrestling department. And I think those two things are going to cancel out in this case. I think that both of these guys are going to struggle to get each other to the ground, especially in the case of trying to take Gamerat down. You know, the fights or the grappling that he showed against Arman Tsarukyan, I see no reason why he cannot do similar things in this bout against Beneil Dariush. Now, on the feet, I think is where most of this fight is going to take place, because if neither fighter can get each other to the ground, it's on the feet, obviously, not rocket science. But on the feet, Dariush, I think, has a little bit more power. Gamerat, on the other hand, Dariush may have a better chin, too. But Gamerat, I think he's more active. I think he's got better cardio. And one small detail I think I like his kicks to the body. And I think that from an all-around standpoint, I think that Gamerat's a better striker. And I think he's going to be more active on the feet. So I think that Gamerat will find the success on the feet. I think he outstrikes Dariush for the majority of this fight. And I think the grappling scenarios are going to result in neither guy landing a takedown. I think Gamerat picks Dariush apart on the feet. I will take Gamerat to win this fight by decision. Moving forward, Chookagian versus Manon Fiorot. This is a very important fight. I think the winner of this could be fighting for a strawweight title. I think that is a little bit more evident if Manon Fiorot wins. Caitlin Chookagian is probably the best fighter in this division, not named Valentina Shevchenko and not named Manon Fiorot. If Fiorot wins. But right now, Chookagian's got a great 4-fight run where she beat Amanda Ribas, Jennifer Maia, Viviane Araújo, and Cynthia Calvillo. Then she's got loss to Andrade, win over Antonita Shevchenko, loss to Valentina Shevchenko. And then if you want to go deeper, everything before that is 2019. You're looking at Maia, Joanne Wood, lost to Jessica Ai, wins over Alexis Davis, Ira Aldana, and then you're getting into some very early UFC fights. But Chookagian, very, very good against anyone not named Shevchenko or Andrade. Now, for Fiorot, she has been on a tear. She lost her first MMA fight, and that came in Cage Warriors. She lost her first pro MMA fight. But after that, she's gone undefeated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins on the regional scene, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 wins in the UFC. Very good wins on her resume, too. Jennifer Maia, Mayra Bueno Silva, Tabitha Ricci, and Victoria Leonardo. I think Tabitha Ricci is going to be a ranked fighter eventually. That win is very impressive in my eyes. Ricci is a 115-pounder, so not the same weight class. That definitely helped Fiorot. She looked much bigger in the octagon that night. But I still value that win. Leonardo, not a terrible win. She hasn't looked great as of late. That's probably the worst win on her UFC resume. Mayra Bueno Silva, 9-2, 2 wins in a row. She's looked good. And Jennifer Maia, who really just has struggled against elite competition, but she's been a staple in the top 5 of that division for a minute. So some very good wins there. And from a skills standpoint, I think we see this fight take place on the feet. And if you're looking at how Caitlin Chookagian wins fights, Chookagian's looking to stay long, and she's looking to poke at you from the outside, kind of fight her way to a victory, whether that be through the jab, through some good kicks, the straights. Fiorot, I think, is one of the few fighters who, even from like a size standpoint, Fiorot is just a little bit shorter and has a little bit less of a reach advantage. In comparison to other fighters, Chookagian is usually far bigger. So this is going to be one where Chookagian doesn't have as big of a reach advantage as she usually will. And Fiorot is also good at managing range. She's also good at the same things that Chookagian's good at. I think she's also good at the jabs, at the straights, throwing down the middle. I think she's got a better variety of offensive striking tools than Chookagian does. I also think that Manon Fior can move forward and land strikes a little bit better than Caitlin Chookagian. I think that Manon Fior will be able to pressure Chookagian in this fight and get Chookagian moving backwards. That makes it harder to throw some kicks. I really like Manon Fior in this fight. I also, in terms of grappling, I wouldn't be surprised if Fior ends up being the better grappler here. I think her grappling's still slightly unproven. I'd like to see a little bit more grappling from Fior. But I think she may be able to mix in some grappling here. I wouldn't put my life on that, but I do think the majority of it still is on the feet, even if she mixes in small amounts of grappling. Now, as far as a prediction goes, you can probably tell I'm leaning Fior. I think Fior is going to be able to pressure Chookagian with damaging shots, be in her face. I think she's more powerful. I think she's able to walk her down. I think she lands solid strikes. I do not think she gets a finish here. I will pick Manon Fior by decision, but I think she wins, 30-27 fairly convincingly. Now, going back to our very close 50-50 fights, Sean Brady, Belal Muhammad. Wow, this episode's going long and we're only 5 fights in. This one, in my opinion, is kind of similar in a way to the Dariush and Gamerat fight. Muhammad and Sean Brady, two really, really good grapplers. I do think Belal Muhammad, this fight has been the toughest one for me to get a read on all week. Now, okay. I think Sean Brady tries to take this fight to the ground. I think he can take this fight to the ground. I think he takes the fight to the ground. I think he's a little bit physically stronger. Actually, not a little bit. He's probably much stronger than Belal Muhammad from a physical standpoint. I think he's able to take Muhammad down and control him a little bit. But if he can do that, I think he wins a decision victory. And if he can't, I think Belal Muhammad gets a decision victory. It's going to come down to the takedowns. Belal Muhammad is going to be a tough guy to take down. And if Brady struggles to get him to the ground, I think that while Muhammad isn't a tremendous striker, Belal Muhammad is good enough on the feet to beat someone like Sean Brady in a pure kickboxing bout. I think he's developed his striking a little bit deeper and a little bit better than Sean Brady has. So, on the feet, I think Muhammad wins those exchanges. I think it's close, but I do have to give it to Muhammad. So, if you think that Sean Brady can get the takedown, I'd pick Sean Brady. If you don't, I'd pick Belal Muhammad. I think that Sean Brady's going to be able to land enough takedowns to win him 2 rounds. And I will take Sean Brady by decision. Now, moving on, Makhmud Muradov versus Caio Borralho. I am very high on Caio Borralho. I really like him. I like his game, but I think there are still spots he can improve and get better. I don't think he's perfect yet. I think he has a lot of the skills to be a very good fighter. I don't think he's there right now. I think if you threw him in there with a top 15 guy right now, he probably loses. I think even if it's 6 months down the road, that might be different. But I think some improvement in his game would be very beneficial. And this is not an easy fight. Makhmud Muradov is a very, very good fighter. And this fight's going to be interesting. At first, I was very, very high on Caio Borralho. I thought he was going to win this fight fairly easily. Then the more I thought about it, the more I understand why people like Makhmud Muradov. I get it. Muradov is a very good striker, great striker. He should be able to outstrike Borralho in this fight. But I just can't get past the comparison of Gerald Meerschaert and Caio Borralho. I think that Borralho is a better striker than Gerald Meerschaert, and I think if this fight gets to the ground, he should be able to outgrapple Muradov in a similar fashion. I don't want to say a similar fashion to Meerschaert because I don't know that that'd be 100% accurate, but I think that Barajo will have a lot of success on the ground. I think he works to get this fight to the ground. He may struggle a little bit in that regard, but I think this is a good test for Barajo to gauge where he's at right now. Because if he can go out there and do what he needs to do, if he can go out there and get the takedowns and start working his jiu-jitsu, I think he wins this fight very easily. But if he struggles to get those takedowns and this becomes, if a lot of this fight is taking place on the feet, I think Muradov will be able to find success. I think he's a better striker than Barajo. I do still lean Barajo by decision. That is my pick. But I think this may be the type of fight where Barajo has a higher ceiling, and I think him at his best beats Makhmud Muradov, but I don't know that Caio Barajo is there yet. So I am concerned, but I will still pick Barajo. And I will take it by decision, like I said. Now, Volkan Oezdemir versus Nikita Krylov. This is another top 10 fight on the prelims. I'm seeing a lot of love for Nikita Krylov from a lot of different people, and I'm just not. I don't understand where it's. I like Volkan Oezdemir in this fight. Spoiling the prediction, but I mean, Nikita Krylov in his last, neither of these guys have been particularly great recently. Both are coming off wins. On one hand, you have Nikita Krylov, who knocked out Alexander Gustafsson in the first round, but prior to that, he got tapped by Paul Craig, lost to Magomed Ankalaev, beat Johnny Walker, lost to Glover Teixeira, beat Ovin St. Preux, lost to Jan Blachowicz, beat Fabio Maldonado, and then that was back in 2018. But prior to that, he was actually that Fabio Maldonado fight wasn't even in the UFC. But there were some previous UFC fights back in 2016. So Nikita Krylov has been unable to beat elite competition, but he has beat good fighters. Volkan Oezdemir is coming off a good win over Paul Craig. Prior to that, lost to Magomed Ankalaev, lost to Yuri Prochazka, wins over Alexander Rakic, Ilir Latifi, lost Dom Reyes, lost Anthony Smith, lost DC. So for Oezdemir, he's beaten pretty much everybody that he has fought in the UFC that has challenged for the title or has been a champion, and the only outlier in that is Magomed Ankalaev. And if Ankalaev wins his next fight, he will fight for the title, so that may change. But I just don't think that, these Tapology predictions, 70% Krylov, 30% Oezdemir, I just don't think that Krylov wins this fight 70% of the time. I think this is much closer to 50-50, and I'd give the slight edge to Oezdemir. Krylov is a good grappler, but he's not great. Volkan Oezdemir is a good striker with some power, and I think he's going to be good enough to stop some takedowns. If he can do that, I think he outstrikes Krylov. And I know Krylov is coming off a first-round knockout victory against Alexander Gustafsson, but I think Gustafsson is done in this point in his career. I think Gustafsson is old. I don't think Gustafsson is the same fighter he once was. I don't view that as a prime win over an Alexander Gustafsson. That's an Alexander Gustafsson who was flirting with retirement, flirting with heavyweight. I don't think that's the best version of Gustafsson we've seen. I'm going to pick Volkan Oezdemir in this fight. I think he's the better mixed martial artist. I think he's more well-rounded. I think he hits harder. As long as he doesn't, let Krylov take him down repeatedly, I think Oezdemir wins this fight. Now, Abubakar Nurmagomedov versus Gadzi Omargadzhiev. This one is interesting. If you don't know who Abubakar Nurmagomedov is, he's been training with the Nurmagomedovs, but he is not nearly as good as all of the other Nurmagomedovs. He's the only average Nurmagomedov. All the other ones are very, very good. But he's the worst of them all, unfortunately for him. Still a good grappler. Not as great as the others. He does have a little bit more of a varied striking approach, kind of more similar to Umar and Saeed in a way where they're a little bit flasher on the feet, throw some kicks. But once again, he's not quite as good as those guys. I do think he will win this fight. I don't like the drop down in weight from 185 to 170 for Godsey. I just think that is the 185 to 170 cut might be one of the harder ones in the sport. Well, when you're dropping weight, it's 15 pounds, and a lot of those guys at 185 that are going down are already pretty jacked and don't really have much body weight to cut. Like if you're looking at the 205 to 185 cut, that's a little bit more weight, but I think those guys at 205 have a little bit more fat to cut, so it makes it a little bit easier. I think this is going to be a tough cut for Godsey to make this fight. So I will pick Abukar Nurmagomedov by decision. I don't remember the original bout order here, but if you haven't seen, we did lose a fight. We lost Chookagian versus Almeida. So I think that fight was in this slot. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but that fight has been canceled. If you're expecting me to talk about that one next, I'm not. It's been canceled. So that leaves us Armin Petrosian versus AJ Dobson. Very, 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 very interesting fight. I think this will be entertaining. We're going. Oh, this is too long of an episode, so we're gonna fly through these next three. I think Petrosian will be able to find success on the feet. I'll take Petrosian by second round knockout. Two great strikers. I understand why someone would pick Dobson. He can probably mix in the grappling a little bit better. Petrosian isn't that good on the ground, but I do think he's a slightly better striker. I think 83% of Tapology voters picking Petrosian is probably a little too high. I think around 70% would be a little bit better for that. Still, I will take Petrosian. Muhammad Mokaev versus Malcolm Gordon. Mokaev, if you don't know, tremendous prospect. Probably, I think he's only 22. Very skilled, highly skilled. Malcolm Gordon, not a terrible fighter in this division. Good step up in competition. I will take Muhammad Mokaev by first round submission, and I think that the Tapology votes on this one are fairly accurate. Mokaev 96%, Gordon 4%. I give Gordon a little chance to win this fight. Mokaev is the biggest favorite on this card. I will take Muhammad Mokaev. Lastly, Carl Rosa versus Lena Landsberg. I've been on a trend here of picking these underdogs in the first female fight of the night. I think these are usually fairly close fights, and I think the underdog pulls them off a little bit more often than people realize. But this one, we've got a minus 330 favorite in Carl Rosa going up against a plus 260 dog in Lena Landsberg. I think this one is a little bit too... I think the skill differential is a little bit too much to bear in this fight. In addition, Carl Rosa is 13 years younger than Lena Landsberg. She's won 4 of her last 5. That's much better than Landsberg's 2 of her last 5. I think Lena Landsberg wins this fight. I think Carl Rosa wins this fight. I will take her by decision. 92% of Tapology voters agree. Once again, I don't know if you can follow people on Tapology or how that works. I'm not really sure. I just enter picks on there. But if you'd like to see my picks, all-time picks, those are all available on Tapology. And you should go... I actually don't care if you go look. Just if you're interested, just know they're up there. If not, don't blame you. You just listened to me explain every single prediction. So it'd be a little pointless to go look at what I put in. Make sure you follow the social medias. I haven't been posting on there because I haven't been recording episodes. Well, I will start posting in there, posting on those again. My apologies for the slacking, but I've been busy. This episode is too long, so we won't get too fancy with this outro, but I will be back on Sunday to break down, maybe Monday, hopefully Sunday, to break down what happened at UFC 280, who these fighters should fight in their next fight, and I'll probably do I don't know if I'll do news on Sunday, because Sunday's episode is probably going to be quite long again. Sunday will probably solely focus on UFC 280. I'll let you know on Sunday. When I record that, I will let you know if we do news or not. More effective than me rambling about it and thinking about it right now. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Head Kick KO podcast, and I hope you enjoy UFC 280.
Oh! He front kicked him in the face! Kevin Lee with the ultimate highlight tonight!